welcome to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV. And tonight we are going to be talking about how orphans should be treated in Islam, especially in light of, at the moment, the period of remembering the captives from Karbala in Syria. And of course, looking more widely at today's events with what's going on in terms of war and so many families being killed, and our responsibilities in relation to the surviving children. And my guest is Sayed Muhammad Razavi. And if you do have any questions or comments, please do feel free to call in. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
I did a program on orphans a few months ago, and was very shocked to hear about the statistics of the rate of suicide among orphans, and also what is actually happening to them in their lives, how difficult it is for them to continue in life. It's a great struggle, more than we realize. So of course, remembering that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny himself was also an orphan, and also thinking of how the child of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Sakina, was treated in prison. I mean, really, we might say again, this is a historical event that we are remembering, but it's still really continuing today, with parents being arrested and imprisoned, or just killed. So many are dying. I mean, again, in Iraq, when we see the coffins coming in from people who have been out on the front line fighting Daesh, you think to yourself, well, that's another orphaned family. These orphan families are accelerating rapidly. It's interesting, I was going to raise one point about how someone is considered an orphan if the father has died, unlike the Western culture where an orphan is if both parents have died. Why is someone considered an orphan if the father has died?
It's not necessarily that only if father died we consider them as orphan. We could say orphan from mother's side. And that happens, but maybe the reason is that because in Arab culture or in Middle East, the breadwinners were considered as men.
Yeah. And
there are some rules also they are related to that. And recently some fuqaha and jurists have said that if a breadwinner of the family is a lady, and she dies, she has the equal status as the breadwinner, male breadwinner,
right,
in qisas and these kind of rules and regulations. And there are Sunni scholars who are coming to terms with this as well, and Shia scholars have already made their decision.
right.
So could be one of the reasons that during those days only the father, if the breadwinner died, they were considered as orphans. Although in teachings of Ahlulbayt alayhi salatu wasalam, we find that they used to consider a person who lacked manners as orphan as well.
Wow.
So lacking a manner of behaving and dealing and existing in a society is also considered as an orphan.
That's interesting.
So, and that's what they used to, Imam Jafar Sadiq and Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam used to write on the door of the educational institutes that the person whose father has died is not an orphan. The orphan is the person who lacks the manners.
Wow.
Is an orphan. So yes, we can discuss orphan from a very wide point of view, from historical point of view, what does Islam say about it, especially in the light of the tragedy of Karbala.
Yeah.
There were many orphans that were created in that tragedy, and also what's happening nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Is there much material? Are there many resources to say how the orphans left from the tragedy of Karbala were treated? I mean, obviously, with the imprisonment of Sakina, the rights were not observed. There was no mercy shown for for those who had survived that trauma. And I suppose we can also say that this is the clear differentiating line between what is Islamic practice and what isn't Islamic practice. We can see that in the way that orphans are treated in different societies. But do we have a record of what happened to the remaining?
As far as Islamic teachings are concerned, the verses of Quran are very clear that the orphans should be respected, that they should not be mistreated, and their rights should be taken care of.
Yeah.
But in tragedy of Karbala, we see everything going against Islam and Islamic teachings. If we all know that people who killed Imam Hussein والسلام, there were quite a lot of them who had memorized the verses of Holy Quran.
Right.
And they claimed to know a lot about Quran, and then yet they stood against Imam Hussein, the righteous leader, and they did not care who he was, and they did not respect him. They did not care about the narrations and behavior of Prophet Muhammad towards Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, how he respected them. And he had also mentioned in his narrations that these are the leaders of the youth of paradise. And then you see so-called Muslims were mistreating them and fighting against them. And we can see the same kind of ideology existing today. These people claim to know Islam, but they are exactly going against the verses of Holy Quran, like what happened in Beirut, what happened in Paris is the example. I mean, Islam does not allow any of these atrocities, and these people are still committing it under the name of so-called their belief, their Islamic belief. So these people do try to damage the image of Islam by this kind of behavior. So in the similar way, in the plains of Karbala, in tragedy of Karbala, as soon as Imam Hussein والسلام, was killed and his head was, he was beheaded, they forgot the Islamic teachings. They immediately went for what they were brought up as culturally, and they totally ignored Islam and Islamic teachings. And the first thing they did, they started to loot the caravan of Imam Hussein والسلام. They burnt the tents, and Bibi Zainab Salatullah alayha with Imam Zain al-Abidin, who was very ill. She was carrying him and helping him to move from one tent to another tent to another tent. And then finally the last tent was also burnt, and the atrocities did not stop there. According to narrations, these so-called Muslims who had memorized the verses of Holy Quran, they went forward and looted even the orphan children. I mean, they were wearing earrings or any kind of jewelry. They did not even bother to take them off or just ask them to hand the jewelry to them, but they just, in a rush, pulled the earrings out of their ears, which ripped the ears of the orphans. And this is certainly not the way orphans should be treated. And any law, under any culture, but unfortunately these people had this kind of culture and they didn't care. They hurt Bibi Sakina and all the young children who were there, and they disrespected, according to Islamic teaching, once a person has died, even if the person had committed something wrong, you should not disrespect the body of the... And they didn't care about that. They trotted on the bodies with the horses, and according to narration, even Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam was wearing a ring, and this person couldn't get the ring out of Imam Hussein's hand, and he cut his finger to get the ring out. So there were this kind of looters and thieves who had who were claiming to be Muslims. And what is happening nowadays is same thing. I mean, these are the followers of the same kind of thinking and belief.
I mean, what's interesting, first of all, is as actually, which we don't often kind of think about really, is that in a sense, Imams Hassan and Hussein alayhim salam were orphaned. So they lost their mother, they lost their father, so they were also left orphaned in a sense as well. And also the other point is that, like you say, the orphans in the children in the camp were attacked and their goods were looted. What was quite interesting with this, we could say almost behavior that is akin to terrorism, is that people justify their actions. So, and I think this is what is happening with, as an example, Daesh today, and it also happened, I think, with Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt many years ago, where you've got these clear set of rulings about how, as an example, orphans should be treated, but some people come along, like you say, who read verses of Holy Quran, and then they say, well, this is only applicable to these circumstances, and the circumstances now are different, and so we've got some sort of justification for going against the original teachings. I mean, this is what I read with one journalist who was saying, like today with the bombings going on in Beirut and France and Nigeria, that people who know Holy Quran, they've memorized it, they know the meaning of it, that native Arabic speakers or their Arabic is excellent, are actually coming up with a reason or rationale for violating, the rights of civilian men, women and children. What do you think we can do about that? Should we be writing, kind of find out these texts, or find out, the books that are being produced, and write responses to these books?
Well, I mean, Prophet Muhammad had very clearly said, and this hadith has been narrated in Sunni sources as well, that Prophet Muhammad said, my ummah will not be misguided if they cling to Quran and Ahlulbayt. Quran is the silent Quran, and Ahlulbayt alayhi salatu wasalam are the talking and speaking Quran. And they are the sources of knowledge. They are the people who were directly taught by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they know everything about Quran. We have to look at the interpretation of Ahlulbayt alayhi salatu wasalam to understand Quran and Quranic teachings properly. When you separate Ahlulbayt from Quran, the result is ISIS, the result is Daesh, and you see this kind of Islam emerging. I'm not saying there are many Ahlul Sunnah who love Ahlulbayt alayhi salatu wasalam, but you would not find them becoming Daesh, you would not find them becoming ISIS members. And they are side by side, shoulder by shoulder of Shia Muslims fighting in Iraq and Syria against the so-called Daesh and ISIS. So those people who totally separate Ahlulbayt ﷺ from Quran and Sunnah, they are the ones who have twisted understanding of Quran. So, and there is a narration which says that if you want to learn something, learn from the source. If you want to learn something, learn from the people of the house who literally lived Islam, understood Islam, and were educated directly by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you separate them, this is the result.
Yeah. What's interesting as well, of course, is in Holy Quran, where it talks about orphans a lot, and it's also the treatment of orphans, or the good treatment of orphans, is connected to ibadah and belief. So we have Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 83, where it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and when we made a covenant with the children of Israel, saying, you shall not worship any but Allah, and you shall do good to your parents and to the near of kin and to the orphans and the needy, and speak to men good words and keep up prayer and pay the zakat. Then you turned back, except a few of you, and now you two turn aside. Okay, we just got a caller in, and we just got 3 minutes till we go to break, so hopefully we'll have time to take this call. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa
rahmatullah. Sister. Very quick question. As the Sayed has just said, a follow to that. Are the people who twist up the Quran, are they entitled still to be called Muslim?
Thank you. Very good question. And I got into a discussion about this a few months ago on one particular program, where the question is, I mean, when people come out and commit these atrocities, then the question is, some Muslims will come out and say, well, they're not Muslims. And, the question arises that, are you a Muslim if you are practicing Islam, or are you a Muslim? Can you still be called a Muslim if you claim you are a Muslim? And someone said to me when I sort of said that people who do this, that they can't be considered to be Muslims. I mean, I might not have meant that in an absolute sense, but in terms of practice, you can't say that's Islamic practice. And somebody said, well, that's dangerous because you're going down the road of takfir. So Shias have takfir done on them, and then, they turn around and do takfir on others. So it's a good question whether we should respond by saying to people, these are not Muslims, or whether we should say they're Muslims, but they've gone down the wrong path.
We could say this act that they have committed is un-Islamic.
Yeah.
The act, I mean, you could be an extremely practicing Muslim, but you are not infallible, so you might do something wrong. But again, we should not blame Tuqisma and all these things.
Yeah.
Whatever we do wrong is our own fault, and whatever good we do is with blessings of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should not blame Allah, and we should consider those who are committing atrocities and wrongdoings, whether they are Muslim or not Muslim, it doesn't make any difference. There are Christians who are extremely extremists. I mean, I was in America, and there was a church in the middle of hundreds of other churches, and they had only 70 members. They used to consider only those 70 members will go to paradise, and everyone else is kafir. So there are takfiris in Christianity as well.
Thank you very much, and we're just about to go to break. Inshallah, we'll see you in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV, where we are looking at the Islamic rulings on the treatment of orphans, especially in light of today with so many orphan children in Iraq and now Syria and really around the world owing to widespread war and conflict that is taking place. And as I did read a report that in this day and age, it's I think we've had the most refugees globally in history, the most displaced people in history up to now. And really, in a way, that's a huge responsibility for everyone. And what I was interested to see as well in Holy Quran is when it talks about the treatment of orphans, the good treatment of orphans, is that it's part of this covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made with the Bani Israel, but also that similarly with the Muslims, it's also this covenant that the one who is righteous is the one who treats orphans well or gives away wealth to orphans also. So it's not enough just to say the Shahada or La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, but that actually has attached to it quite a few conditions. So could we say that perhaps we are not taking this condition of good treatment of orphans seriously enough, like the zakat? I mean, it makes it the equivalent here of zakat or salah. Perhaps we're not taking it seriously enough.
Yeah, it's an obligation. There are very clear verses of Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a lot of emphasis on importance of orphans and their property. They are a trust. Their property is a trust, and the rules are clearly defined that if you want to handle their property, you have to make sure you do justice.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, we may, and just to let our viewers know that you're not feeling very well today, so I'm going to ask our viewers to please make dua for Sayed Razavi as he's not feeling well. But also, we see this happening also with not just with regard to the war that's going on, but we hear about this going on in families today, Muslim families as well. That I mean, a lot of the fights that go on among families are due to land, fights over land or fights over property. And when an orphan child is due to receive some land or property in the will, often the relatives will somehow manipulate things to make sure the orphan. I mean, what are the effects in society of that?
If you bring something haram into your family and feed your family through what is haram, it has side effects. So you may feel or think that you have been clever and taken some property or belonging of an orphan and used it for your own personal advantage. But the side effect would be far more damaging.
Yeah.
And although Quran does consider this point as well, that you may allow yourself to take something like handling charges. I mean, sometimes looking after a property itself requires spending some money. Like if an orphan has a farm, you cannot just leave the farm and don't touch the money that is involved in the farm. So you could take some money as a salary or something, but you have to be extremely careful, extremely just. You should not take more than what you deserve. And so these rules are very clearly defined in verses of Holy Quran, that if for some reason you have to handle the property and these issues are involved, you can take, but be careful.
Right. So again, that's relying on people to be honest. And
this is between you and your God. I mean, you cannot hide what intention and how much you took from the property.
Again, the narration here where the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny says, watch your tongues, cover your eyes from seeing forbidden objects, and prevent your ears from hearing forbidden affairs. Be kind to orphans of the people so that others are kind towards your orphans. I mean, this is interesting as well, that he's not just, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his holy progeny, he's not just talking about the orphans of Muslim children, but he's talking about any orphans. And I was going to say that, again, sometimes these people who call themselves Muslims, who are justifying, say, capturing orphans or utilizing them for their own purposes, or mistreating them, may justify that by saying, well, they're not Muslim children, they're non-Muslim children, so it's not incumbent upon us to treat them well. But that has no basis in Islam either.
You have to respect orphan, whatever their madhab or religion may be.
Yeah.
And it was also a practice during that time, that especially if a person had left daughters as orphan, and people would rush to marry them, not with the intention of helping the orphan, with the intention of inheriting the wealth.
Right.
So Quran had also warned about that be careful, your intention should be as if you're marrying a non-orphan child, and you should take everything into consideration the way you would have taken care for your own child.
Yeah.
So you should not mistreat because they don't have a father. So, okay, I can do whatever I like to do.
Yeah.
Recently somebody sent me a clip. It was very nice clip that... And this happens quite often because the orphans are usually looked after by the relatives. Yeah. And those relatives are the ones who mistreat them.
Yeah.
And so somebody sent me a clip. The father of the child died, and the uncle took over the responsibility of the child. Mm-hmm. And then he was sending his own children to private school, and this orphan child comes and he says that my teacher wants the school fee. He said, well, what do you need to study for? You come and help me in the shop and become a good businessman. So this is also considered as mistreatment. Yeah. If you are sending your own child to a private school, you have taken over the responsibility of an orphan child, you should take care of the orphan child as your own child.
In the same way. I was almost waiting for you to continue the story and say that that child that was brought up in the shop went on to become a multimillionaire while the other ones wasted their lives.
Yeah, that happens.
Divine justice.
And this is the side effect of mistreatment.
Yeah.
I mean, we think that we have been clever and tricked ourselves. I mean, I shouldn't say trick Allah or someone else. By doing, those who take over the property of an orphan, they are tricking themselves. Yeah. And the side effect is in Persian they say that the stick of God does not make sound. Mm-hmm. When it comes back to you, you wouldn't even hear coming back.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to be careful. If you commit any kind of atrocities, especially to an orphan, that may come back to you and your children, as Quran very clearly says.
Yeah. So we see that, of course, as a reminder, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him himself, was an orphan. So we've got Surah Dhaha, where it says, did we not find you an orphan and give you shelter? It's interesting that, again, and I think this is a big message for the society at the time, and it still is a message for us today. And perhaps even subconsciously, those of us who see these pictures of these orphans who have been impoverished because they don't have parents to take care of them. And we may look at them and think, obviously we think it's terrible and poor them and I wish I could help. But also sometimes people may think, well, what are they going to do with their lives and what are they going to become? And is it really worth me kind of giving that little bit extra, because who are they anyway? They don't have any family or status, or in terms of social status. And yet, what happened to the Holy Prophet, who became, he was created as a prophet, but born, became orphaned in this life, but still went on to have an incredible destiny. So it shows that you can't just judge someone because at the time that you see them, they may be orphaned and they may also be poor because they're an orphan. You don't know, what Allah has intended for them or wishes for them. So if you contributed to their life or their education, you could actually go on to contribute to someone becoming a great person.
Yeah, and we have seen examples, people who really took care of the orphans later on in their life, although we shouldn't do it with this intention.
Yeah.
We should do it purely for the sake of what is our responsibility and duty.
Yeah.
And this person had taken care of orphan, and at his old or her old age, the same orphan children looked after the person much better than their own children.
Wow.
So this is possible, but as I said, it shouldn't be done with that intention.
Yeah.
All our actions should be done purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah takes over and He rewards us in this world and the world hereafter.
Yeah, so we shouldn't fall into that trap of thinking that what can these children contribute because they're so poor.
You never know what they might become in future.
Yeah.
Potential is there.
Yeah.
All you have to do is nurture it, and the way you are nurturing the potential in your own children, you should treat them equally and give them the same opportunity.
Yeah. And of course, when we look at what has happened with Syria as well as, we know that in Iraq there are thousands and thousands of orphaned children who are surviving by working, so that means that they're not getting an education as well. And the same with Syria, particularly obviously in Zainabiyya. There are certain organizations that have taken in a huge influx of orphans from around the country. And in fact, a couple of years ago, one of these shiuch who was looking after a lot of orphans, it was the middle of a very bitter winter, and I know that some people were helping to support some of these orphans, and somebody said, so what are our donations being used on? And the sheikh said, coats and shoes. So again, I think the danger of us being over here in this part of the world, physically away from orphans in other parts of the world, is that we don't fully realise really the challenges that they're up against. And it's quite shocking to think, well, it's a very bitter winter, it's pouring with snow, and they don't even have shoes or coats. I wonder whether we should, in a way, actively get involved, like not just travel for ziyarah, but perhaps add a few days on to the ziyarah to at least visit an orphanage, not just look at the orphans, but actually do something to help out.
Yeah, that's actually it will be more rewarded if we just go for ziyarah, spend money, and then come back.
Yeah.
If we know that there are orphans, there are people who are suffering in Iraq. We should take care of them. Recently, when I went to East Africa, we went to distribute some rice and food for the orphans in a small village. And suddenly one of the rice sacks ripped, and the rice was all over on the floor. And suddenly all these kids rushed to pick those rices. And I said, in Europe, where we live, we waste so much. And if this much, it was hardly a handful of rice. But for the sake of handful of rice, all these kids were fighting with each other to pick that rice up with the dirt and everything. And I asked, what would they do? He said, they will go and clean, and this will be a meal for them.
Wow.
So we don't appreciate what we have.
Yeah.
We just waste a lot. I mean, the amount of food is wasted in holy month of Ramadan within Muslim communities. Or especially if you look at the way it is wasted in Middle East, it could feed so many people.
Yeah. And perhaps also, rather than just looking at a few practical points, rather than some of these, or all of the centres, like across the Muslim world, that provide iftar in the month of Ramadan, if there is anything left, then they could also donate that to charities that are taking care of orphan children, or distribute it to local orphanages or organisations that are taking care of orphans, rather than...
In this Muharram at Islamic Center, we intended to give 2 days of our evening food that was given after the majlis to the refugees in France, but it didn't work.
Okay.
People are not willing to give up their food.
Oh, wow. So
we need a lot of work and education to bring this into practice.
Yeah.
So
for those 2 evenings, they would have had to bring their own iftar instead, or?
No. I mean, Muharram, we had programs and we were feeding around 2,000 people per night.
SubhanAllah.
So we had intended to give 2 nights food to the orphans and needy instead of eating ourselves.
Yeah.
And you could go home and eat. But
yes, right, I see.
And we had this idea, but it didn't work.
So everyone still wanted to go there and eat.
They still wanted to eat.
Yeah.
So if we had not provided the food for them, it would have caused problems.
Right. So
people did donate. They said, okay, we will donate for them, but don't cut the food.
Right, okay. I mean, as you say, there's often an excess sort of left over, and also it's the spirit of the thing, because like you say, I mean, as Holy Quran says, you won't attain piety until you give away what is dearest to you.
Plus, the whole program was to coordinate with other centres.
Right.
And none of the other centres coordinated with us. They didn't like the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that was another reason why it didn't work.
Right.
Because we were the only centre who were offering this, and other centres were not willing to cut the food of a night.
Right. That's something to reflect on, really, because that tabarruk is 1 carton of rice usually.
Tabarruk could be a piece of date.
Yeah.
Or samosa. Or small.
Yeah. And in the month of Muharram, people haven't been fasting all day, so it's optional. It's not. Okay. So something to reflect on for everyone to think about. That can we kind of give up 1 meal or assist the centres across the Muslim world? I was going to say, well, wherever Muslims are, assist the Hussainiyas and assist the centres by offering to just give up 1 night of tabarruk in the month of Muharram. And perhaps these majalis also coming up for Arba'een to actually organise with the centres and say, tonight I will have something else, and the cost of that can go to the refugees or the orphans.
And it wasn't much. I mean, we had worked out that it costs £2 per person to feed at the centre, because we provide the facilities for cooking, so it would have cost people only £2 per meal.
SubhanAllah.
So, but people are not ready to even depart for that £2 meal.
I mean, also taking care of an orphan. Again, because we are inculcated into perhaps more of a materialistic thinking than we think, where we don't realise actually that we ourselves can benefit spiritually, qurbatan ilallah. I mean, like the chapter in Holy Quran where it says, we have showed you the way to ascend, and that is one of the ways of ascending to Allah is to take care of the orphans. So a lot of people will say, how can I achieve nearness to Allah? Or how can I improve my spirituality? And in Holy Quran it says, by taking care of the orphan. And we might think, well, that doesn't sound interesting enough or kind of theoretical enough. But actually, it's a very practical way of each of us growing as individuals.
Yes, not only orphan. I mean, there are verses of the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that a beggar should not be turned away.
Yeah.
I mean, whether he is an orphan or not, if a beggar comes to you, you should not turn that beggar away.
Yeah.
You should give something. Although we should not nurture the culture of beggars, and the beggars also have responsibility and duty. I mean, they should not make a business out of it. And I mean, we know how many people, especially I have heard stories that some of these beggars are professional beggars.
Yeah.
And we witness a lot of this in Hajj season. They pretend to be disabled and this and that.
Yeah.
And when you follow them, you discover that it's a kind of business.
Yeah.
Recently, somebody sent me a clip. He used to put a dummy of a lady on the footpath with the chadar on the head and leave a note for begging. And he would come with the posh car in the evening and pick up the dummy and money and go away. So some people just make profession out of it. So that's wrong.
And that is also actually indirectly also diverting funds away, obviously, from those who would really need it. So these professional people who make a profession out of begging have diverted, the money away from what people who would have given it to those who are really in need as well. I mean, there's also, I wonder also whether this practice really goes on, where we have in Surah An-Nisa verse 3 where it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, if you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphans, then marry other women of your choice. Does that mean that someone could raise an orphan to the age of marriage and then marry that orphan? Or what does it mean here? It says, if you fear that you will not deal justly, then marry other women.
Yeah, this is what I was referring earlier in the program, that it had kind of become a practice. People used to take care of the orphans, and then they would rush to marry the orphan girls.
Yeah.
Not with the intention of helping them, with the intention of inheriting the wealth they would bring with them. So the verse is very clear. If for some reason you are interested in marrying them, first of all, treat them and give them the equal right of a non-orphan girl. And once you have married them, because under Islamic law, a lady's property is lady's property. And she can not be forced by husband to spend anything on the house bills or anything. I mean, if a lady is a millionaire, the husband still has to provide for her. So when you have this rule that the lady does not have to contribute anything towards the family expenses, anything, her money is her money and her husband's money is her money as well. So why you mistreat an orphan? If you have married an orphan, her money is her money. You are not allowed to touch. So, but they used to marry the girls with the intention, because they are orphan, there is no one to take care of their money, and I would end up taking care of their money. So, which is against the principle.
And of course, I mean, we've just got a couple of minutes till we go to break, but this has also been, as I read, happening in Syria as well, where people are coming in from the Gulf,
rich countries of the Gulf,
and then going into Syria in order to marry, whatever orphan girls they can find. Not always orphan girls, but some of them are bound to be orphans as well. And that, sadly, is also really taking advantage of the situation, which is putting to shame, really, the principles of taking care of orphans in the Muslim world.
Now, here I would invite the Western world who keep on shouting and saying about having discussion about the forced marriages. Why they become blind of these rich Arabs who are mistreating these girls. I mean, they just go use their wealth and marry these girls on any condition and take them away, and then they don't treat them properly, they mistreat them.
Yeah. This is something that really needs to be highlighted as well. It's almost like an overwhelming problem. We're just about to go to break, and we're talking about the treatment of orphans in Islam, but also in light of what is going on today and what are our responsibilities. And inshallah, we will be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV, where we're discussing the importance of treating orphans well, but also in light of what is happening today with the turmoil that is going on in the world and what our responsibilities are. And Sayed Razavi, I was going to also ask you, in your opinion, whether supposing someone does adopt an orphan, and it comes to mind that I remember a few years ago there was a lady that I knew on social media who had adopted a child from Iraq, I think it was. Is it easy to do that, or do you think it will require psychological training? I mean, it might be easier to adopt a child from your own environment or culture, but if you're taking a child from another country into your family...
Yeah, it is a big shock for the children who are suddenly moved from one place to another place and one environment to another environment. It is shock already to lose their parent and then suddenly moved around. So certainly it's not advisable. If you want to take care of them, help the families who are looking after them and take care of them there in their environment, provide them enough so they could not be detached from that environment where they are living. Unless there is a serious problem and they have to be removed if the abuse is taking place and abuse cannot be stopped, then in those cases, of course, I mean, the removal of the child from abusive environment is recommended.
Right.
But I would still suggest that it is better to keep them with the blood relations of the child and help the families who are looking after them so they can feel close to their ancestors and elders who have died.
Yeah, that's another point.
And not mistreat them.
Yeah, and not be cut off from visiting the graves and also knowing their identity as well. And of course, we also have the issue, actually thinking about the treatment of orphans in the society. Not only we have the orphans, obviously, in Iraq and Syria, and like you're also saying in Tanzania, and obviously many countries around the world, but also in the UK there are children in care. So there is also, of course, this issue of adopting children or fostering children, and in fact, it seems that often Muslims hesitate to go to social services and take in a child or adopt or foster someone else's child. And as a result, we see a lot of Muslim children going to non-Muslim homes, being brought up as non-Muslims. I mean, should we do the opposite? Should we actually actively go out to social services, especially perhaps those couples who can't conceive a child, and maybe look into adopting children who may be orphaned and may be in care, even if they're from a non-Muslim background?
Yeah, that's one of the solutions. And when I went to Africa, I noticed that in this orphanage where I was there, in Kibaha, there were quite a lot of non-Muslim orphan children there. That is the right thing to do. I mean, create a healthy, peaceful environment where the orphan child doesn't have to think of earning their own living. They are taken care of from every point of view, from education, from health, from the environment. And I witnessed there were kids who were not willing to go back to their family and other places because they knew that they will not be treated properly there. So they preferred to be with Muslims in that environment and stay there. And there was no force on them to leave their religion. I mean, we were doing our amal for the month of Ramadan, and they were clearly told those who are not Muslim, they don't have to take part in these activities, but they liked and they loved to take part in those activities. So if you treat them properly, they may consider in future, but if you mistreat them, don't take care of them properly, they will only become they will only grow up hating us. So adoption is good, and taking care of them is good, and but in a professional environment. So
that's what I was thinking, because people may be misguided. I mean, not misguided, but perhaps unprepared. Let's say, because there was the case where there were orphan children from Romania who were adopted, and there were stories of the couples who had adopted these children, and they had underestimated how emotionally damaged they were. So
it's not easy. It's much easier to have your own child and bring the child up without any kind of damage than bringing up a child which has gone through a lot of atrocities and tragedies in their life. They need, first of all, they need counseling and professional help.
And so to be prepared that if one is going to take a child into one's home, that it's going to be obviously a huge life-changing event with many, many challenges possibly, as well as rewards, obviously.
They are mentally scarred. I mean, mentally scarred. And as Prophet Muhammad used to say, that especially when a child urinated on him and the mother snatched the child away, he said, this snatching the child away will leave a mental scar on the child, and this urine can be washed away easily. So he was aware of these mental scars, and unfortunately the so-called Muslim Ummah mistreated his own grandchildren. And unfortunately there are people who keep on doing this. I mean, just recently, what happened in Beirut, what was done by ISIS in Beirut and Paris, we have totally ignored what happened in Afghanistan. I mean, during the same period, there were some children who had been orphaned in front of their eyes. Their parents were captured, killed by ISIS, beheaded, and after that, they did not even leave the kids, and the kids were beheaded as well. So this is the mistreatment of orphan as well. And nobody raised a single voice about it. Nobody said anything. And there are pictures going around in the Muslim media that how these, I mean, a 3 or 4-year-old daughter, a girl, was beheaded by these so-called ISIS. Actually, there is a movement going on. We should not call them ISIS. We should call them NISIS, and non-Islamic state of Iraq and Sham. NISIS, not ISIS.
I think that's definitely yes. I don't know why we kind of adopt the name that they choose for themselves. Doesn't make sense.
We should not give them right to use this name at all.
And you know, there's going to be. I mean, this is something that also is quite puzzling because since there are such clear stipulations in Islam for the good treatment of orphans and the punishment for the ill treatment of orphans, and it's really severe punishment for the ill treatment of orphans, and again, especially appropriating their property. It seems strange that people can mistreat or sense of these violent groups that are killing children. They have no compunction in killing children. I mean, what can, again, the members of the Shi'i community do in this situation? Because a lot of people feel quite helpless. What can we do to try to raise awareness or to try to serve the children better, to get funds over there? Because sometimes people don't know what they should do or how they can help the orphans.
We need that proper and professionally trained orphanages with professionally trained staff in the area where these problems are being created, and look after them, take care of them, and bring them up so they become an asset for the society where they have become orphaned, rather than just moving them around the world and even in some cases depriving them of their own culture and religion and whatever their elders wanted them to be trained and brought up as. So we have to be very careful.
And also reflecting on this issue of what's going on in Calais, and people wanting to, obviously people have been raising funds for refugees in Calais and on other refugees coming into Europe, but there has been some warning that, again, some of these donations can be misguided. So someone went to visit Calais and they said that actually there's a lot of leftover food because it hasn't been distributed properly, or people just don't need it, and there's a lot of leftover clothes because people are just distributing too many clothes, actually. So, I mean, looking at the real situation, that, again, we shouldn't just be perhaps raising funds and doing what we think is in our imagination what people will want, but actually, again, like going on ziyarah physically, like I was saying earlier, you actually pay to travel somewhere. Would you advise that we actually go on the ground and speak to people and find out what they need, or attach ourselves maybe to an organisation?
Yeah, I know some sisters have gone all the way to Greece to wash the dead bodies of the ladies who have died during this migration, and there is no one to wash their bodies. Although at the same time there was another message being circulated that somebody is trying to trick some Muslim ladies and get them into these kind of activities away from their families. So please double check such invitations and charities who are inviting you to go all the way to Greece. So we have to be very, very careful who is inviting us. Are they reliable charities or not, and are they well established or not? So instead of going for help, we end up in trap ourselves. Especially our ladies should not become emotional and not rush to go for these things. And once they have investigated properly and realized that these are well-established charities and who would take care of not only the people who are suffering, but also the people who are coming to help them, and they will not be mistreated, then of course they should go and help them, because leaving a dead body unwashed and without a burial is sin, because according to Islamic teachings, it's a responsibility of all Muslim Ummah. If a dead body is left without shroud and without burial and without washing, it's everybody's responsibility. But if a group takes up this responsibility, then everyone else will be excused. But
wajib al-kifaya.
Wajib al-kifaya. So we have to be very careful, and of course we need to help.
And actually, take more of an interest. There's also obviously orphan sponsorship programs as well, where you can individually sponsor a child and get news of that child. I was wondering whether the organisation in Kibaha in Tanzania does that, or whether it's more of a general donation.
Kibaha usually takes care of the local orphans there, but I'm sure there are organizations which are doing work on a larger scale, like Lady Fatma Trust and others.
Yeah.
They have facilities around the world where they can organize proper orphanages and proper facilities within that environment and country, rather than dragging them all the way here and then risking them to hand over them to an environment which is not suitable for those kids.
Yeah, so again, I think like you were saying earlier, where people were reluctant to give up one night of tabarruk. That, in fact, people often use the term, coffee, give up the price of a coffee to support a child. Perhaps, reflecting on things, we need to be mobilized a lot more with regard to what's going on. I mean, as far as I know, there's one sister who has been working very, very hard with the orphans in Iraq, some of the poorest of the poor families, but I don't know a lot of people who are also doing that. And I perhaps, for anybody who's thinking out there, I want to do something for Islam, because I also get people writing to me saying, I want to do something for Islam and Ahlulbayt Islam, what can I do? Perhaps this is something that people could take up and make this more of a central focus than we have been giving it, especially when we're thinking about the condition of the Muslim world today, that Syria has been destroyed for generations to come, Iraq, and this is really going to affect this part of the world long after we've gone. So it's a case of rebuilding the country.
Yeah, of course. It needs a lot of work and efforts, and we have a responsibility and duty to help these people to re-establish themselves. And if we had not interfered in their affairs and created, partly we have created, the Western world has created the problem by bombing and interfering in the area which they don't even understand how they exist and how they run. So now the problem is coming back to them in the West. So we have to be very careful. We have to take care of. And also, I wanted to raise a point that there are charities who spend a lot on handling charges and give a little. Unfortunately, there are some Muslim charities also following the same trend that exists in the mainstream charities, which is not right. And Quran is very clearly advising us against that. That if you handle an orphan's property, you're allowed to have something what is necessary to look after the property, look after the interest of the orphans, but you're not allowed to make business out of them. And there are charities in the mainstream society who are not spending money as much as they should spend on the charitable acts, and they are taking money for the staff and running posh offices and flying around the world and this and that, and not spending on that. So they should ask for charities, people who donate charity, to give and take care of their needs rather than taking from orphans. So we have to be very careful, and especially Muslim charities should not follow this trend. And we have come to know that there are some Muslim charities who have started to follow the same trend that exists in the mainstream charities.
Okay, that's again a bit of a shame, and perhaps we can sort of appeal on air now for those Muslim charities not to sort of go down the same route as the non-Muslim charities.
spend the money for the cause rather than the people who are handling it.
Yeah.
And you can ask for donation for them and be specific. Look, if we cannot deliver whatever we want to deliver, like for taking food to all the way to Africa or Iraq or Syria, requires costs. So they can say that and be open about it rather than just using the money that has been given to them for without the permission of the donors.
Also, another thing that I get asked by people is how they can provide toys or clothes for children in Iraq, and how can they send them. And I think it's very difficult at the moment you can't really send something in the post. So as I've been told by one person who's working on a charity out there, that the best thing to do is to actually either send it with someone again on ziyarah or bring it on ziyarah yourself. And this is something else that people could do, as well as perhaps spend a couple of days helping out in an orphanage, but also just if you are doing ziyarah, pack a few extra things that you can provide and give away, and then get in touch with the local charity there, and they can come and collect that, and that they can come and meet and collect those provisions. But at the moment it has to be really done by hand, in a sense, of people coming in. And I suppose if you've got 20 million people coming into Karbala, inshallah, for Arba'een, and everyone just brought the equivalent even of £1 for a local orphan charity, that would be so much.
And we should donate from what we consider good for ourselves. There are people who would donate things that are out of date, or sacrifice an animal which is about to die or ill. I mean, one of the rulings for sacrificing a goat or an animal for the poor and needy is that it has to be as fit, as healthy as you would have taken for yourself and consumed yourself. So we have to follow the same criteria. What you eat yourself should be also given to others, not just out-of-date material. Or
that's tempting for people as well, as I was saying the other day, because if we think again about the principle of the sacrifice of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who gave the ultimate, gave his life for the sake of other people, then we should be able to give something that we like, or that we see as nice for ourselves, and be able to again give that up. And perhaps I know I've spoken to some other ulama who say that unfortunately the Shia community is perhaps not aware of the extent that the work that needs to be done, really, to assist those in need. And perhaps again, when we do go to Muslim countries or any country around the world, we can make the efforts to find out what's going on, as you say, rather than just doing the ziyarah or visiting somewhere and then coming back, but actually going out of our way to investigate and make ourselves aware.
There is enough corruption in Iraq going on, and an Iraqi brother was saying to me that the only income that Iraqi people are getting directly is from the pilgrims.
Subhanallah.
And this is a country which is rich, full of oil and everything, but the money ends up in wrong pockets, and they keep on building palaces around the world and here and there, and they don't take care of their own. I mean, it's not a big country.
No.
It doesn't have a very large population. The amount of wealth they have, they can easily look after not only their own people, they can actually donate for other countries. Because one of the richest countries, but unfortunately due to corruption in Iraq, quite a lot is being wasted.
This is also a great shame and appeal for anyone who might know of this corruption going on, or who might be aware of it, or be aware of those involved in it as well, to actually, this is something that really does desperately need to be addressed. Because again, like you say, if the economy was sorted out properly and there wasn't usurpation going on from the people's rights, then there wouldn't be this situation of very impoverished orphans, in the country.
People overthrew Saddam to get peace and justice and society based on justice of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. But unfortunately, they're far, far away of that justice.
Yeah, which again shows a kind of a cynicism, really, and a lack of insight into what is needed for the future. I mean, again, there's some interesting narrations on those who do deprive the orphans, and the one from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam here says, on the day of Qiyamah, some people would arise from their graves in such a condition that flames of fire would be protruding from their mouths. And the people asked, "O Messenger of Allah, who are these people?" And he replied, "Those who have illegally appropriated the property of orphans." So they will be, in this case, it's not people just necessarily directly taking the personal property of orphans, but it's still preventing funds getting to those in need. So there's that issue as well, not just taking property that doesn't belong to you, but also preventing funds that need to get to
for personal gains and benefits. I mean, I came across a brother who had sent a large amount of rice and food for the orphans and needy in Iraq, and the authorities were not letting it go through because it has the bags did not have anything written in Arabic on it. So in the modern world, you can Google translate everything and find out what's going on. But I mean, that was not an issue because this charity was not willing to give the bribe to the custom officers in Iraq, and they were holding the whole, sacks and sacks of rice and the food that was sent for them. So this discourages people to help them.
I think definitely, because when there are charities going around that are collecting, people are very, very wary about donating. But anyway, alhamdulillah, we've raised some very important points, and I wanted to thank you for a wide-ranging discussion. And inshallah, I will be back again next week, and I wish you a good night.